I had to go for a run to calm down. As I was running up a hill, suddenly struck me. Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins. And I remembered that scene. Perhaps you do too. There must be some Julie Andrews fans here. It's when she takes Michael, the son of Mr. Banks, to visit the bank where Mr. Banks works. And they try to persuade Michael to deposit his tuppence halfpenny pocket money in the bank. And he says he doesn't want to. He wants to use it to feed the pigeons. Give me my money back, he says. And another client of the bank standing in the bank office hears this and says, did you hear that? They won't give that boy his money back. I think I want my money back. Could I have my money back, please? And another client says, did you hear that? They're not giving people their money back. I'd like my money back, please. And I want mine too. Stop all payments. The bank has to suspend payments. It goes bust. Mr. Banks loses his job. It's a bank run. You can imagine the feeling I had when I remembered that scene. I ran back down the hill to my laptop and I sent an email saying, what an extremely good idea.
That was Neil Ferguson speaking at the London School of Economics, explaining how a gathering of bankers, irritated over his warning that an economic crisis was at hand, petitioned the organizers of the conference he appeared at to show Mary Poppins next time around. Now, that story was the genesis of his bestseller, The Ascent of Money. Ferguson pointed out that the lack of knowledge of financial history has been one of the prime causes of our present global economic crisis. Tonight, we're going to adapt his thesis and suggest to you that the perennial problem in the boom and busts that clog our headlines is a profound ignorance on the public's part of the dangers of politicians, bankers, and regulators being too cozy with each other. A problem we're seeing at home and which is on spectacular display abroad too. So tonight, a legacy of fraud. I'm Manolo Quezon, The Explainer. This is The Explainer, where we explain why issues are issues. Now, returning as our explainee tonight is a member of the improv comedy group Spit, Kenneth Kang. Welcome back to the show, Kenneth.
Good to be back, Manolo.
Well, and I'm very glad, just before the show started, Kenneth was telling me about the tremendous amount of research he did, so it's a great plus for our show. But as we prepare to discuss the Legacy Bank Group and how it went bust, why don't you invite our viewers to join in the discussion?
Sure. Text REACT space X space your name and your question or reaction and send to 2366 for Globe and Sun and 231 for Smart. Or you can log on to www.the-explainer.com.
Our discussion on the Legacy Bank and how it went bust after this. Last year, the Bangko Sentral padlocked 13 rural banks belonging to or affiliated with the Legacy Group of companies, alleging unsafe and unsound banking practices, insufficient assets to cover liabilities, and poor liquidity. Now, the Legacy banks attracted depositors with promises of 20% interest. According to the Philippine Daily Inquirer, the genesis of the Legacy Group scheme was the, quote, Legacy Savings Program in the first bank Celso de Los Angeles bought, the Rural Bank of Parañaque, which offered a 5-year, double-your-money time deposit scheme with additional come-ons, such as free insurance. And unlike most banks where you have to go to a branch to talk to the staff and set up an account, Legacy basically engaged in direct selling to get deposits, which is against banking rules. Now, that attractive rate of interest got people to deposit their money in Legacy's banks. Now, a bank makes money on deposits by taking your money, lending it to others, and charging a rate of interest on the loans higher than the interest it's promised you or its depositors. But if you offer a freakishly high rate of interest, that means you have to charge an even more freakish rate of interest on loans from deposits. A difficult thing to do. But what if you engage in abnormal banking practices? That is, what if you use your banks not as real banks, but instead as a means to gather deposits which then aren't exactly loaned out, but redistributed to pay interest to your original depositors? We've seen such schemes before in previous episodes of this show. They're called Ponzi schemes. Now, a Ponzi scheme works so long as everyone thinks everyone's fine and dandy and new deposits come in to cover the old depositors expecting abnormally high returns on their deposits. Indeed, as with the stock market, a clever Ponzi scheme is guaranteed to grow, as investors interested in getting rich quick wonder if they aren't being stupid in passing up a scheme that's too good to pass up. In The Ascent of Money, Neil Ferguson said that there are 5 steps in the boom and bust of a stock market bubble, in which individual stocks or a bunch of stocks, and thus the market, artificially goes up in value until people realize there's no way earnings will match expectations, and then everyone stampedes away from the stock market or out of the market. Now, Ferguson writes all bubbles go through the following 5 stages. Kenneth, would you like to go through them?
Certainly. The first stage is displacement, as economic change brings a chance for extraordinary profits. The second is euphoria, as investors take advantage of the opportunity. Mania, as novices, crowds, and swindlers rush in. The fourth is distress, as the insiders see their prospects for profit declining because of the mania and start selling. And finally, revulsion, as all stampede for the exits.
Now, Ferguson says that what helps stock market bubbles, and for our purposes tonight, what might have helped boost legacy stock or reputation among investors, is either official connivance or indifference to a growing bubble, or outright fraud and manipulation by insiders, or both. Now, the Philippine Daily Inquirer recently published a 4-part report on the Legacy Group and why its banks failed. Part 1 was titled Legacy Banks, Doubles Money Scheme. Former PDIC chief was alerted 3 years ago. It tells the story of a phone call. Former Prime Minister Cesar Virata, then President of the Bankers Association of the Philippines, called up Ricardo Tan, then President and CEO of the PDIC, which is the government agency that insures all our bank deposits. If you remember our episode on the Great Depression, deposit insurance is a legacy of the American New Deal to protect the middle and working classes and to help ensure confidence and prevent bank runs during times of financial panic or hardship. Now, Virata and other bankers were worried over banks offering double-your-money schemes to depositors, sometimes even with cars as incentives. When the PDIC and the Bangko Sentral started looking into these too-good-to-be-true schemes, all trails kept leading to one man, Celso de los Angeles, who is now mayor of Santo Domingo, Albay, and who'd been in hot water over banking irregularities once before, in the 1980s. Now, according to Tan, investigators said that De Los Angeles' 13 rural banks were to have, quote, fictitious deposits, rotating collateral from one bank to the other, unsafe and unsound banking practices, and improper documentation, end quote. Now, this worried the PDIC, which already had an exposure of 4 billion pesos as of 2006, which is when Tan left PDIC. In 2007, according to the Bangko Sentral, the banks whose deposits the PDIC insured were found to be insolvent, that is, bankrupt. By the time the banks all closed, they'd racked up an exposure of 14 billion pesos. That's the amount PDIC would be obligated to pay depositors to cover their accounts. Now, part 2 of the Inquirer series was titled Nograles Invited Banks Probers to Dinner. Now, it tells a story of how the PDIC started investigating what is now known as the Legacy Group Rural Banks 4 years ago, during the term of then PDIC President Ricardo Tan. The report said that Tan was asked out to dinner in 2005 by then House Majority Leader Prospero Nograles through his subaltern George Regalado. At the dinner, where Celso de los Angeles made an appearance, Speaker Nograles allegedly interceded on behalf of the Legacy Group, asking Tan to go easy on Legacy because it had helped fund the campaign of Vice President Noli de Castro. Now, the Speaker subsequently strongly denied any wrongdoing, while the VP admitted that he did receive campaign support from De Los Angeles. Part 3 was titled Legacy Owners on BSP's 1984 Watch List. It pointed out